Hi, welcome to my YouTube channel. Today is day 2 of our lesson. So just to recap about yesterday and what we covered, we learned about our chessboard, the diagonals, our files, and our ranks. And remember, the alphabets must face you. And we also covered the names of our chess pieces, their points, and the movements. So today we're going to cover checkmate, stalemate, check. You see, because one might wonder, how does a chess game actually end? It normally ends in a draw or checkmate. So a draw, it normally happens due to agreement or stalemate. But I'm gonna explain what is a stalemate. And you win or lose when you are checkmated or when you resign. But don't be confused, I'm still gonna cover that. But then I want to go back a bit. I noticed I missed something about the pawn, and I'd like to apologize for that. Here's our pawn. I intentionally left what we call en passant, but then I forgot other stuff of which I'm going to cover now. So the pawn actually moves forward as mentioned. It only captures diagonal. When the piece is close to it, it captures diagonal. Not diagonal far, but close. Are we good with that about the pawn? And also the movement of the pawn, this is very important. It moves straight, it never sideways, only if it captures. Okay? And the pawn can only move twice when it starts. That's when it can only move twice. But when it moved, let's take for instance, it is no longer on the 2nd rank or the 8th rank for black. It can only move once from there. But when it starts, it can move twice. It's okay. And also this one can move twice. Are we okay? Perfect. So now I want to cover something called en passant. En passant is what happens. It is a special way of pawns capturing. Right? So take for instance, this pawn is here and it moves twice. So it passes this one without challenging it. So at some instances they kind of believe it is a bit unfair somehow for the pawn to just pass. So if your opponent pushes the pawn and faces your pawn like this, you can capture this pawn with something called en passant, just like this. Did you get that? Let me do it for black on the other side. So if black passes me twice, not necessarily passes me, but faces me horizontally, I can take this pawn with something called en passant. It is a bit challenging. Even some people who play chess, they still forget it at some point. But then I believe I covered almost everything about the pawn. And also, when the pawn arrives in the final rank, normally the pawn starts here. If you move, and you manage to get here, you can promote any piece here. We call this promotion. You crown. So which piece do you promote? You can promote either the king or queen or bishop or knight. You can't promote the pawn, you can promote the king. So, but preferably, logically, in most cases, you promote the most powerful piece, of which is your queen. It's more like an achievement. Okay, fine. So now let's get to the business of the day now. Sorry about that. As mentioned, that I'm going to cover checkmate and stalemate and a check. So checkmate, it's when your king is threatened, right? But it doesn't have a safe square to run to. Do you get that? So we call that a checkmate. So when your king is threatened by your opponent's piece, we say check, right? But then your king must run to a safe square. But if we don't have that safe square, we say it is a checkmate. Let's put that into practice. There's my king, there's my opponent's king. I have my rook. Remember, it moves horizontal and vertical. So here's what I'm gonna do. If my rook comes here, what am I pointing? I am pointing my opponent's king, since my rook moves vertical and horizontal. So I say to my opponent, check. Your king is under threat. I'm threatening to take your king, but we don't take opponent's kings. We say check. So now my opponent has to move to a safer square, a safe square. My opponent has to get rid of this rank, which is not rank but file, which is controlled by this rook. So now my king is safe, it is no longer under check. Are we good with that? Take for instance, we are under check, but you come here. It is not a good idea, you are not allowed, it is prohibited, if I were to say, since you're still under the threat of the rook. So you have to move to a safe square, right? Take for instance, now I have my other rook here, and I say check to your king. Your king is under check. I can't come here since I'm in the same file of the rook, and I can't also come here since I'm in the same file of the rook. So I'm still under check. So I have to find a safe square. This is my safe square. Okay, so that was check. Now let's cover what we call checkmate. So let's take for instance, I'm creating a scenario. I have my rook here, I have another rook here. Here's my opponent's king is there, right? So this is what I'm gonna do. I'm gonna say check, right? Let's say without knowledge that this is a checkmate, I say check, hoping that my opponent will run, but then my opponent tries to find a safe square. He can't come here since he's still under threat. He can't also come here since he is still under threat. Remember, the king moves once. Can you come here? No, because there's a rook in this rank. Can you come here? There's still a rook in this rank. So after having tried everything, it is a checkmate. Do you get that? But then I want you to note these three things about a checkmate before we confirm that it is a checkmate. Make sure that if you're playing with the black pieces, make sure that you can't run. We try to run, but we can't. But can we block the check? Now we don't have anything to block with. Can we capture what is checking us? Now we can't. So let's start with the first. We already are covered running, so we can't run. So let's say now we have our own rook somewhere here. We are trying our second option, which is blocking. So we are under check, but then don't panic, it is not a checkmate. Why? Because I can block the check by coming here. So you notice that I'm no longer facing the king, I'm facing the rook. So the king, it is no longer under threat or check. Awesome, so that's not a checkmate. Another option will be, let's say we have our bishop here. I can't run and I realize I can't block, but my third option, can I remove what is checking me? Sometimes you remove the threat, you don't block the threat, you don't run away. It's more like a life lesson, just remove the threat. Now I captured the rook. Am I still under threat? Is your opponent still under threat? No, he blocked your check. So the life goes on, now he's safe. Awesome. That was checkmate. I believe that was okay. Check, checkmate, I covered that. So that's how you win a chess game, and that's how one loses as well. So now I want to cover what we call stalemate. Stalemate. My pronunciation is bad. So what is a stalemate? Stalemate is a position whereby black has no move, like there's no any other piece to move. Probably he's left with the king, or the pieces are blocked, mostly your pawns. Black does not have any other move. If the king moves, it moves to a threat. In such case scenario, we say it is a stalemate. Let me put that into application. So there's my opponent, here's my king. My queen, I meant to say. There's my king. So now it is my opponent's turn to play. Can my opponent go to a safe square? Remember, kings are not allowed to go to squares which are under threat. So if it is black to play and he can't come here because the queen moves horizontally, he can't come here since the queen moves vertically, and my opponent can't come here because the queen moves diagonal as well. So now in this case scenario, black can't do anything. So I'm gonna say, no, I won't say anything. It is a draw. It is a stalemate. You can't move, so you draw. So chess is painful in a sense whereby you have a bigger piece, but still you're gonna draw, right? But for clarity's sake, let's say we have pieces here. I'm creating another scenario for you. So you realize that black has pieces here. He has 2 pawns and the king. But then those pawns, they can't move since I covered that. The pawns, they are blocked like this. You can't move or jump. You only move aside when you capture. So in this case scenario whereby the pawns don't move and there's a king there which is stuck in the corner. So there's no any other movement. I can't move my pawns. Can I move my king? I also can't. So I'm gonna say stalemate. This game is a draw. And how do we write a draw? 1.5, 1.5. So our scores in chess 1-0, 0-1, or half. So this one is a draw. So this is gonna be the end of it for today. I'm gonna cover another chapter for tomorrow, which is daydream. So just to recap a bit, I started with the pawns, the end pass out, and promoting, and I covered the check, of which is your king when it's under threat. Then I covered checkmate, of which it is your king when it is under threat, but it cannot move to a safe space, of which it is a checkmate. That's a checkmate. That's how a chess game ends. And also I covered what we call stalemate, our current position here. Black cannot move anywhere, the king cannot move anywhere. So it is a draw, that's a stalemate. But not always that chess games end like this. Opponents, they resign, resign, like I resign, I know I'm gonna lose. So let's save time, resign. But don't give up, like just because a stalemate might happen, you see, so don't give up. So some resign, they come to an agreement of a draw just to save time as well. Or when some opponents, they agree initially that they're gonna draw the game. And also, I just wanna remember if I've covered everything for today's lesson. So I just wanna show you a quick checkmate of rooks before I close. Yeah, on how to checkmate with rooks. So here's my case scenario here. So remember how the checkmate happens. Like you close the king into corner. What you keep in mind is the king. So how do you close or lock and limit the moves of the king? So whenever you checkmate, you don't just checkmate. You limit the movement of the king. So I realized that my king, it is in the last rank. I'm not gonna say check because I'm not limiting the moves. I'm giving it freedom to move to another rank. But what I can do now is close this rank for the king so that it cannot move to another rank. And how do I do that? I take one rook, limit the movement. Now the king is limited to this rank only. That's how you checkmate. Having that in mind, my opponent will play here but not here because I've limited the moves. Since he is closed here, therefore now I can say checkmate in this last rank. That's how the game will end. Every checkmate, that's the logic behind. Take for instance, I have this rook only, right? That's how you're gonna checkmate with rooks, the last rank. So my king is here now, and how am I going to checkmate now? I will need the assistance of the king now. It is no longer the same with 2 rooks. So I'm gonna get my king close while he plays, get my king close. Let's say that's the case scenario, right? So if my opponent moves here, this is an ideal type of checkmate of kings, of the rook king. So if I play here, this is a checkmate because I cannot move here in any of this rank because of the rook. And the kings don't face each other. Do you get that? Since a king can also capture. So kings don't face each other. So this is a checkmate since the king does not have any movement, right? I wanted this video to be short, not to cover checkmates on how to checkmate with certain pieces. So I'm just gonna cut here, and hopefully I'll just cover on how to checkmate with 2 bishops, how to checkmate with a rook and queen. You see. So thank you for joining my lesson. Please subscribe, and I'll see you with the day 3 video. Enjoy your day.